As would be the case with most of the films in the Millennium era, Godzilla's next adventure ignores the events of the previous films with the exception of the 1954 original, and stands as part of its own continuity in Masaki Tezuka's 2000 film Godzilla vs. Megaguirus.
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little town, Jim.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chills and Thrills. My name is Connor Dunham, and again, I am here with Chris, and we are on Godzilla vs. Megaguirus of the Godzilla franchise. And this is a film that I may have struggled a little to get through. I actually watched it today, and I have fun with all the Godzilla films, but just the story of this film, we'll get into it. But it's just not one of my favorites. It's not one of the most complicated or entertaining Godzilla films, but I do go back to this film still every now and again. I have fond memories of it when I was a little bit younger. It was a little higher on my list just because I liked that they kept with the Godzilla 2000 design for the most part, and that design in my mind again is just fantastic. And overall, I mean, I can still have fun with this film. But Chris, what do you? I know we've talked about this film a little bit, but how do you feel about Godzilla vs. Megaguirus?
Uh, yeah. So this one debuted on the same day as GMK, the next film, on the Sci-Fi Channel on August 31st, 2003. And you have to think, for American fans, between August 2000, when Godzilla 2000 hit theaters over here, and then August 31st, 2003, we weren't really treated with any of the newer Godzilla movies that Toho was making at the time. So to get two of them debuting on the Sci-Fi Channel on the same day for a 12-year-old me, that was, or 11, sorry, mistaken, 11-year-old me, that was huge. So I remember watching them basically back to back and being insanely like impressed and excited by both of them. Like, I love them both a lot. Um, this one hasn't aged nearly as well as GMK has. Uh, there's a lot. It's a lot for me. I compare it most often to Godzilla versus King Ghidorah from the Heisei series, where the sort of basic mainline plot for me is like really dumb and really annoying, and I would just never pick that plot for a Godzilla movie. But then kind of all of the other things it does, generally speaking, like all of the monster related stuff, all the Godzilla related stuff is very solid and very legit and very entertaining. And it also is hampered by the fact that like this one feels sort of like cheap and almost made for TV grade. Like, it doesn't feel very cinematic. And then 2 years later, more or less, the same team that made this movie kind of did a much better movie that's almost a remake. When we get to Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, it is almost like the better, more superior, more efficient, kind of higher production value, more, well executed version of this movie. So it's kind of got this almost exact copy that does it a lot better 2 years later. So it's like the legacy of this one is not very strong, but on the front of the monster stuff and the Godzilla stuff, it does have a lot to enjoy there. But in terms of the plot, the human characters, stuff like that, it's nothing to write home about.
Yep, and I agree with you on that. It's one of those ones. Like I said, I had fun with it as a kid, and as I've aged, I've grown to not like this film. It has not aged well with me. So, but I mean, like, I still like the Godzilla design. Um, Megaguirus has another, it's another flying monster, and I'm not the biggest fan of flying insect monsters. I love Mothra. She's always like number two, number three on the monsters list for me, right behind Godzilla. But I still can enjoy this film, but it's not one of the go-tos that I'll put on if I'm in the mood to watch a Godzilla movie. This is not something that I will willingly put on, unless, I'm having a marathon or how we're doing these podcast episodes about them. So we're doing them all in order.
Yeah, it feels a little out of place in the way that it's, this is the, when you marathon the Godzilla movies, I once had a girlfriend that did watch every single Godzilla movie with me over the course of however many weeks. And, when you're in the 50s and 60s and 70s, you can kind of like wink and nod at some of the tropes, like every other movie's got an alien invader that looks human and speaks our languages and things like that. Stuff that is just sort of products of the time, the type of campier movies they were making then. But then as you progress, the movies kind of get a little more, you know, not realistic, but a little less wonky, a little more slightly believable. There's a little bit more of a suspension of disbelief that you can have, a little less wacky, a little less comic booky. And then when you get to a modern movie that has like something as buck wild as like a black hole cannon and they're shooting a black hole on the earth, like that is just like, you know, it's incredibly dumb as a concept and it's very hard to defend that one. If this were a movie from the 60s, you can kind of, whatever about it, but to defend like a modern movie from 2000, it's like firing black holes from satellites. It's like, what are you talking about here? What are you doing? Like it's beyond, oh, giant monsters exist. It's like, oh, we have a black hole cannon that we're going to use against Godzilla. It's just, and it's man-made, and this is a modern day set movie. This isn't like a sci-fi movie set like 500 years in the future. It's like it just gets kind of, it's just dumb for lack of a better term.
So, what plot line do you dislike more, the time travel in King Ghidorah or the black hole in this?
Oh gosh, I mean that's a pick your poison kind of a moment. I don't know. I mean, I would say that the black hole doesn't really break the realities of time and space, but that's exactly kind of what a black hole does, especially with the fact that like the Mechanulla comes from the wormhole in this movie, and it's kind of weirdly implied in fan circles that it's related to the Meganulla creature that's in the original Rodan. So it's like, dude, I don't know. Like it's tough. It's tough. I'd say overall, I don't know. I mean, it's different. Like this is just a one-off movie, so you can kind of just like put this one in the dumpster as like a one-off, and it doesn't impact any of these other Millennium movies. The King Ghidorah one, kind of like whatever annoys you about that sort of time and space wonkiness, kind of like throws a wrench into the entire Heisei continuity. So it's kind of like more destructive in some ways. So I don't know. I don't know. This one's executed in a more wonkier and cartoonish kind of way, but like as a concept, I really don't like time travel.
I had to pick your brain on that one and
Yeah,
see get
it's
you
tough.
working.
It's tough to say. It's tough to say.
Well, here, let me give you some background and stuff on this film, and then after that, we'll get into a trailer, and then I'll have our guy Chris here give us a plot synopsis.
Absolutely.
All right, Godzilla vs. Megaguirus is a 2000 Japanese kaiju film directed by Masakai Tezuka, written by Hiroshi Kashiwabara and Wataru Mimura, produced by Shogo Tamiyama, and starring Masato Tanaka, Shosuke Tanihara, Yuriko Hoshi, Masato Eve, and Toshiyuki Nagashima. Produced and distributed by Toho, this is the 25th film in the Godzilla franchise and the second film in the franchise's Millennium era, as well as the 24th Godzilla film produced by Toho. And this film features the fictional characters Godzilla and Megaguirus, portrayed by Tsutomu Kitagawa and Minoru Watanabe. Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, despite featuring the same Godzilla suit that was used in its predecessor, Godzilla 2000, ignores all the events of the previous installment, as well as every other film in the entries aside from the original 54 Godzilla film. And this premiered at the Tokyo International Film Festival on November 3rd, 2000, and was released theatrically in Japan on December 16th, 2000. So there's just a little background information on the film.
Yeah,
So
I would have given anything for Godzilla 2000 to get a direct sequel that wasn't this. I appreciate that they keep the aesthetics of Godzilla 2000. That the general suit design is essentially the same, the breath is essentially the same, but I really dislike that they kind of broke the continuity again to kind of do another reboot. It's like you watch this movie, it's like this wasn't worth doing a reboot over. You know, I dig that it opens with like a prologue that details the exact sort of timeline and backstory of this world we're living in. Like it has a proper prologue for a reboot, but I just really don't like that it's not, you know, not that I would have wanted this to be in continuity with Godzilla 2000 because this is some wonky off the rails plot compared to Godzilla 2000, but I don't know, I would have loved to get a proper part 2 to Godzilla 2000.
100%, I agree with you on that. But as a standalone film, I mean, pretty, what is it? Every film from here on out in the Millennium era is pretty much a standalone film besides going back to the original 54 film. So it would have been, even to have a trilogy, the 54 film, Godzilla 2000, and then like you said, the sequel, just to see like what else they could have come up with. Like, there was a piece of Orgo left behind that didn't burn or something, and it ended up organizing into another creature or something, or growing off of the radiation that was left behind that from Godzilla releasing his atomic breath inside of Orga's body or something, and it's feeding off of that was left in the air or something. Just some crazy story like that would have been fun to see.
Yeah, it felt like they were really unsure with how to sort of reaffirm or reintroduce or sort of refocus Godzilla after the 98 movie. I've read in places that apparently the plan was to kind of do Godzilla 2000, Megaguirus, and whatever was next as like almost three different pitches for what the new series would be based around, and that the one that was like the most successful would be the one that they would then like continue off into a franchise, which is a shame because Godzilla 2000 and GMK are both much better and, from what I understand, more successful than this one. But because the director Masaki Tezuka was kind of a bit of a company man, and they kind of had some creative differences with the director of GMK, and the director of Godzilla 2000 had already directed several films in the Heisei era. Like, they kind of ended up not going with the best team or the best movie, but just kind of the one that was like the most convenient. But instead of making sequels to this, they just kind of hired that same team and crew to just do a sort of much better remake of it, sort of a reversion of the concept with Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. So it's like this weird sort of just the way that the Godzilla franchise always evolves and progresses. It's always got all these odd things that happen and these weird things that throw wrenches into the plans, and this like weird perspective of what was going on behind the scenes. And so just really interesting. Like, the Millennium series gets opportunities for these different takes and different versions of the character, but like it almost gets lazy in that regard. It's like, oh, everyone's just another follow up to the original, and you'd barely even have to see the original. You know, they're all these one offs that kind of exist in their own little world, and it's like that in and of itself gets a little repetitive.
Yeah, this Millennium series isn't. There's not too many films out of these couple that are in my top 10, but we got a couple good ones. There's a couple ones that are meh, and then in this one, Megaguirus, I'm just not a huge fan of this film. I feel like they could have, like you said, they could have cut 15, 20 minutes out of this. You shake a film, your quote, and 10 minutes will fall out. Or
Yeah, and it's interesting that, you know, when we get to Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, I will go into like great detail about how it, like, you know, you say this movie could have been shorter. It's like Godzilla against Mechagodzilla almost corrects every single problem that this movie has, and just sort of does it better or does it in a different superior way or does it in a more effective way. So it'll be very nice to talk about that because the team on this movie clearly learned and improved. But we essentially within one series we get a movie that's in so many ways basically a remake of another movie. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to talking about it. We'll get to some fun facts and stuff like that. But when it comes to Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, I think it's time that we drop a trailer in, get a plot synopsis on the film, and then we'll come back with the usual, some numbers, fun facts, and get to talking about some other good stuff and characters and whatnot about the film.
Sounds good to me.
ディメンションタイドはブラックホール兵器です。奇岩島に G を誘導し、上陸したところを消滅させる。
メガキラス。メラニュラーは群れの中から一匹を選んで巨大化させる。これがメガギラスだ。トンボもゴジラもろとも消しちまえ。
これは私の仕事よ。
最大のデスバトル。ゴジラ対メガギラス G 消滅作戦。ゴジラが。
The prologue of the film acknowledges the events of the first Godzilla film, using the 1954 Godzilla monster rather than a successor Godzilla, while inventing its own timeline, explaining that the oxygen destroyer was never used here and that the capital of Japan was moved from Tokyo to Osaka. In 1966, Godzilla attacks the first Japanese nuclear plant in Tokai, Ibaraki Prefecture. After this, the G-Graspers, a section of Japan's self-defense forces, is dedicated to combating Godzilla. In 1996, clean plasma energy replaces nuclear energy, but this does not deter Godzilla from attacking the original plasma energy reactor. As a result, plasma energy is banned in the country. In 2001, an experimental satellite-based weapon that fires miniature black holes, called the Dimension Tide, opens a wormhole through which a prehistoric dragonfly enters the present and deposits a single egg before exiting through the wormhole. A boy named Jun Hayasaka finds the egg and takes it with him when he moves to Tokyo. The egg starts oozing a strange liquid, so Jun throws the egg in the sewer. The egg, actually a mass of hundreds of eggs, splits up and starts growing when exposed to water, hatching into large dragonfly larvae called Meganulon. Late one night, the couple out on a date walk into a back alley to be alone. The woman leaves to go get drinks while her boyfriend waits for her in the alley. While listening to music, he doesn't notice a sewer barrier shaking and a Meganulon leaps out and attacks him, grabbing him with its claws and spitting some kind of vicious slime in his mouth before the creature drags him inside the barrier and kills him, leaving his headphones behind. When his girlfriend comes back with the drink, she doesn't find him anywhere, but instead finds his headphones covered in slime on the ground. She crouches down and picks up the headphones, wondering where the slime came from, and she hears a strange noise coming from behind her. The woman nervously drops the headphones as Meganulon appears behind her. When she turns around, Meganulon splits slime on her face and knocks her down to the ground. The woman tries to fight off the insect, but Meganulon grabs her waist and claws and drags her across the ground and inside the sewer barrier. The barrier shakes again as the woman is heard screaming before being killed and eaten by the Meganulon. The insect then scales the side of a building and bolts into Meganulon. Soon after, a portion of Shibuya is flooded, and a colony of Meganulon molt into a swarm of adult Meganulon. Meanwhile, Godzilla appears in search of a source of nuclear energy, despite the edicts shutting down all such attractions after its 3 previous appearances. While Godzilla is fighting the G-Graspers, who are assisted by rebellious scientist Hajime Kudo, the swarm of Meganula are attracted in turn to Godzilla's energy and attack him. During the course of the battle, the Dimension Tide is launched, but Godzilla survives the attack. Most of the Meganula are killed by Godzilla and the Dimension Tide, but a few manage to drain off some of Godzilla's energy and return to the sewer. With Godzilla seemingly following. With the last of their strength, the Megaguirus inject Godzilla's energy into a huge sleeping larva that is in a giant pulsating cocoon. It molts and appears from the water as Megaguirus, the queen of the Megaguirus. After destroying part of Shibuya with shock waves generated by her beating wings, Megaguirus heads to the waterfront and faces Godzilla. As they engage in a lengthy battle, she uses her speed to avoid Godzilla's attacks, but Godzilla eventually uses his own speed against her. As she flies towards Godzilla, he lunges forward with his dorsal fins in her path. She flies into the fins, and one of her arms is severed. Megaguirus, having been mutated by Godzilla's energy, generates a blast similar to Godzilla's atomic breath and knocks Godzilla down. Megaguirus speeds forward with the stinger on its long tail lowered, trying to stab Godzilla between the eyes. In the climactic moment, Godzilla catches the stinger in his mouth and crushes it in his jaws. Godzilla finally blasts Megaguirus with his atomic breath, causing it to burst into flames and die. It is revealed that Godzilla was attracted to a secret plasma energy project housed at the Science Institute. In violation of the ban, the G-Graspers continue their mission to destroy Godzilla, but with Dimension Tide falling out of orbit, they are unable to get a lock on it. The vengeful Major Kiriko Sugimori pilots a ship towards Godzilla, ejecting only at the last second. The Dimension Tide is able to lock onto the craft and fires just before burning up on re-entry. Godzilla blasts at the approaching black hole with his atomic heat ray, but vanishes. In a postlude, however, Sugimori again enlists Kudo to investigate suspicious seismic activity. Then in an after-credits scene at Jun's school, an earthquake happens and Godzilla's roar is heard again.
Atta guy. Perfect.
Right. Yeah, that's not so bad. God, it was weird. I almost cracked up reading that because it devotes like 50% of this plot synopsis is devoted to the couple that gets attacked. I was like, what the hell? Is this some kind of like troll job or something?
Yeah, it's like a 45-second scene, and
yeah, they like half of this plot synopsis is like describing the intimate details of this attack. I was like, what nonsense is this? Like,
literally a little over a paragraph.
Yeah, it's like 2 paragraphs. They don't mention the main character until the final paragraph of the synopsis, but whatever, that's fine. That is fine.
It is. All right, how about we get into some fun facts on Godzilla vs. Megaguirus?
Sounds good.
The budget of Godzilla vs. Megaguirus is estimated at $8,300,000. It opened in Japan on December 16, 2000, and grossed approximately $10 million, making it the second lowest grossing entry in the Millennium Godzilla series, with total admissions in Japan being approximately 1,350,000 tickets, and the worst for the series since Terror of Mechagodzilla in 1975.
Oof. I wish I could say that the film deserved better than that, but I honestly can't say that it does.
I think Terror of Mechagodzilla deserves better than that.
Yeah,
Still.
yeah, I agree. I agree. Terror of Mechagodzilla is it's an underrated one.
And you would know that if you've listened to that episode so far, that we give a lot of love to that film. This is the last Godzilla film to have been produced and released in the 20th century.
Yeah, that one, I read that piece of trivia earlier, and I think that one's kind of odd because, for me, I know that might not be normal, but if 1900 starts with 1900 and goes to 1999, that is 100 years because 1900 is a year. Are we now is it the other way? Is 2000 considered the 20th century and 1900 is considered the 18th century? Or the 19th century? Like 1900 is technically part of the 1800s. Like I always thought I thought that was a weird piece of trivia. I'm like the centuries start with 0. I'm like, that's just how the centuries work. So I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong and this is how people have always thought of it, but I would take umbrage with the idea of calling the year 2000 part of the 20th century. I'd say it's 21st century.
I always thought exactly how you are thinking right now.
Because I mean, when it was December 1999, they kept talking about the new millennium. So if we're starting the new millennium with the year 2000, then the year 2000 would be the start of a new century. You know, it starts with 2. It's not the 19. It starts with 20. It's
I am
2000.
I am 100% in agreement with
Yeah.
you. So we're
Much.
in the same
Feel like
boat.
I feel like I'm in a Kevin Smith movie arguing about this stuff, these semantics.
Yep, we are absolutely in the same boat here.
Same as like, just like we were arguing what qualifies as a tease and what qualifies as screen time for Godzilla. You know, like my God.
If I see his whole body, that is an appearance.
Yeah, that's not a tease. Yeah, exactly. All right. Sorry. Continue.
No. In this film, Megaguirus and the Meganulon are both adapted from the Meganulon, which first appeared in Rodan, which you stated a little bit earlier.
Yeah, which is kind of cool, kind of neat. You know, I remember there being all this hype about like, oh, they're gonna connect the different continuities and eras with these wormhole things. You know, like kind of people hoping for like this weird multiverse thing back in the day, but nothing ever came of it. But you know, maybe that's for the better.
On the Pluto Godzilla TV channel, I flipped it on the other day, and Rodan was on, and it was like right in the middle of it. And I had seen the Meganulon was on screen, and I was like, "Oh, I don't want to ruin it. I got to start it from the beginning one of these days." So I turned it off after like a minute. So
Cause you've never seen it, right?
nope, I still got to get on it.
It's good. It's good. It's legit. Uh, the Meganulon are not like the huge part of the movie. They're kind of just. I don't want to spoil it, but I mean they're almost a misdirection in some ways. But it, you know, it's kind of neat. It's a cool callback. It's a neat callback for this movie. You know, reaching into the roots. You can tell that Tezuka likes to kind of dabble back into the Showa roots. You know, he does some really cool stuff with like refilming moments from the original Godzilla movie with the new suit and like compositing the new suit into the old footage and things like that. You know, stuff like that's like really neat, kind of like hardcore fan stuff, you know.
Absolutely, and I love the callbacks. And you know, one of these days I'm gonna make time because you know Rodan. It's only like an hour and 15 minutes long. It's not very long, so.
No. You've seen the original Mothra, right? Or have you not seen that one either?
Yeah, I've seen all
Okay.
of those, the Rebirth
Okay.
trilogy and
And the 61.
yeah.
19. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, Rodan's not as good as Mothra, but Rodan's fun. Out of the 50s, like I know there's like Varan and the Mysterians and like all that stuff. Like I each to their own. I'm not hating on those, but like Rodan's the only like non-Godzilla one from the 50s that I'd kind of like want to include in the sort of overall Godzilla canon. But you know,
Love to do the Mothras with you someday soon. So don't
well,
get too ahead of yourself.
We'll get to that. At least the original, because you know, fun fact, I've not seen the Rebirth of Mothra trilogy. Well, I've seen one of them. I only saw the first one. I didn't watch 2 and 3.
2 is not very high on fans' list, but I've heard from what I've seen, fans like 1 and 3 a lot. I like all
Okay.
3 of them, but
I dug 1 quite a bit, but it was just one of those things where like I kind of dug it, and then I heard different things about 2 and 3, so I was like, let me just kind of like sort of like when you don't show certain people like Matrix 2 and 3 and you just leave it at 1 and you're like just enjoy the first one for what it is and don't watch the controversial follow-ups.
absolutely watch the controversial follow-up. All right. Certain shots in the scene depicting Godzilla's first attack on Tokyo are stock footage from the original Godzilla, with the Gairagoji suit digitally replacing the Shodai Goji suit, which we kind of knew.
Yeah. Which that's cool. That's neat. You know, that's fun that they're like retelling the story with this new timeline, you know. I wish that Godzilla 2000 would have had a bit of a prologue like this, you know, to kind of contextualize it.
Yeah, that's to me. I love the beginning of this film when they're doing the little prologue and giving like the rundown of Godzilla and how he came back 12 years later and destroyed the city again and hasn't been seen for this amount of time. And I like that beginning. What is it, like 5 or 10 minutes, if that?
Yeah. Yeah, movies like RoboCop and Starship Trooper did a lot of like using the news breaks to kind of cover the world building of the stories. And I thought it was kind of cool that like this opens up with like old newsreels and like news reports kind of about Godzilla's, like a history of Godzilla news report, almost like of his how he's been interacting with Japan for the last, 50 years or so. Like I thought that was a cool storytelling device.
For sure, I like that, and I love when movies do that, or they start at a certain point in the film, and then it's almost like a retelling to work your way up to that point. I like when films do that as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
Although this film uses the same Godzilla suit that was used in Godzilla 2000, the films do not take place in the same continuity. In this timeline, Godzilla was not killed by the oxygen destroyer following his attack on Tokyo in 1954, and he did not return to Japan again until 1966. This film does not mention the use of the oxygen destroyer, and it is unknown whether it simply failed to kill Godzilla or if Dr. Serizawa declined to use the device or never invented it in the first place.
Yeah, that's interesting. It does weirdly a lot of the well, this one and the next one in particular, they do kind of have this weird like they'll say things like, "Oh, the original movie is in continuity," but then they aren't really like in the way that Return of Godzilla in 1984 is very much a direct sequel to the original movie. These Millennium movies that even use 54 as the backdrop, they like this one and GMK and Final Wars and arguably 2000 are kind of like they just kind of like use that 54 as like a loose backdrop. Like you can almost come in without seeing that movie at all. Like Godzilla against Mechagodzilla is the only one where I would say like you have to watch some movies before that one for the continuity. But these other ones kind of like they kind of use a general awareness of yeah, Godzilla attacked back in the 50s as like their rough backstory, and then they kind of just completely do their own thing, which is an interesting approach.
Yeah, I like one-off films, just especially if they're going to try to do something different. But then I'm also with you where I like the continuity of the first couple films in the Showa era, how they kind of stay tight with each other. And then same with like the Heisei era, the Return of Godzilla, Biollante, like them films are super close in continuity. And I like that as well. But if you're gonna do a one off, I mean this is a crazy idea that definitely deserves to be in a one off.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
That is all I have for you for fun facts. Just had a couple for you there.
That works. What shall we move on to next?
Who was your favorite character in the film? We'll go to that.
Uh, as a default, I'd have to go with Sujimori. I like for all of the Godzilla films we've had, we don't have a ton of characters. Godzilla versus Space Godzilla comes to mind, where the main character has a kind of overt Godzilla killed a friend of mine and I'm seeking vengeance type of character arc. You would think with as many films as there are, there'd be maybe a few more, or that would be a pretty common thing. But it's actually like kind of rare that I'm thinking about it. And so like she's got an interesting sort of character dynamic that she's like overtly wants to kill Godzilla. So I mean, there's not a ton of amazing and dynamic characters in this movie. The kind of pervert scientist that is always kind of hitting on her. Like he's fun, I guess, and he's sort of like the tech guy. And I like some of his bits where like the computer program that he uses to fix computers is like it's like a sort of like anime avatar version of Sujimori. Like stuff like that's fun, but I mean I'd say Sujimori is probably the best character.
Yeah, I chose her as well, and I can picture the scene you're talking about. He's like, "You remove Kariko, babe," and the guy's like, "The major."
Yeah, yeah. Like first
Gives
she's
you a
going
little
around.
chuckle.
Yeah, yeah. First she's dressed up as like a nurse, and then she's like in her little military getup. It's like, oh man, this guy's a weeb. That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, she kind of busts his chops at the beginning when she's like, "Yeah, the bowl's really a microwave oven, and the robots mix the mixture." And he's like, "What'd you have to do that for?"
Yeah, which my one of my favorite things is that like these kids are like, oh, it's not magic. It's just these super cool advanced micro robots making food in a bowl. They're like, this is dumb. I thought it was real magic.
Yeah,
It's
how
like,
disappointing
it's
that
like, what? Yeah, what 10-year-old would not find those things like really cool, you know?
Yeah, that might even be advanced for our time now. Little robots
Yeah,
mixing.
exactly, exactly. It's like, it's always funny to me when I watch some of these movies with this like advanced tech and like the title card comes up and it's like 2001 and it's like they've got like micro robots and black hole guns. It's like if you're gonna like indulge and have and like the Griffin ship that they're flying around shoots like proton cannons or something, like it's like if you want to indulge and have this sort of like super tech, like just throw your movie like 20 or 30 years into the future, because 20 to 30 years you can still mostly have everyone like dressing and looking like modern times, but then it gives you leeway to kind of do some of that crazier stuff and make it seem at least a little less ridiculous, you know? One of my not to get us off topic, one of my favorite examples was when they made Jason X in like 2001ish, 2002ish, and like it starts off in 2010 and it's like the Crystal Lake Research Facility and it's like what? You know, it's like like it's just one of those wild things. It's like, oh yeah, a research facility 8 years in the future from now, you know?
Well, yeah, and then they don't take any prisoners or play any games. They just jump straight to 2455. It's like, holy hell,
Yeah,
you just jumped
yeah,
400 and some years.
yeah. That's a wild entry in that franchise.
Oh yeah, but it it's a fun one, and we'll we'll hopefully get to that one here
Yeah,
down the road as well.
maybe we will get to that. Exactly, exactly.
I'll give you my favorite score since we both had the same character. We might have the same score or favorite soundtrack as well. And I went with the main title for this one. I listened to this soundtrack twice while throughout the workday at work, and nothing in this film really sticks out to me. You know, it's a lot of the main title kind of like redone with like little notes added in certain parts in the film, and I didn't find this soundtrack very interesting. I know we get better ones in the millennium era after this, but when it comes to this film, I went simple and I chose the main title.
Yeah, I think the specific track is called Fateful Confrontation. It's sort of the new uh Godzilla theme. I mean, they repeat it throughout. I'm sure it's in a lot of the tracks, but that's kind of the one that I was listening to. And it's that Godzilla kind of that dun 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 and then the drums bum 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 bum. It's a good track, and an interesting thing about that is that the composer Michiru Oshima, she, the only female composer for a Godzilla franchise, she, like the director Masaki Tezuka, both come back for Godzilla against Mechagodzilla and Godzilla Tokyo SOS, and just like the director, she too sort of develops her composer skills and her version of that theme into sort of more like a superior version, like everyone, like a lot of folks that worked on this one come back for Godzilla against Mechagodzilla and Tokyo SOS, and they all really, you know, as much as I'm not a big fan of this one, everyone that comes back for those two really up their game. And so like everything's looking better, sounding better, written better, directed better, so like it's a nice upgrade. And it's like, sure, you know, we get this movie that's like very much a, you know, to call it amateurish isn't the worst thing in the world. It's not meant to be super disrespectful, but it's a lot of people's sort of first time in the franchise as far as that goes. And then by the time they get you know, they come back for their next film and the next film after that, like they really start to dial in their style. And so I'm really looking forward to talking about their better movies down the road.
Absolutely, and they're coming up quick. You know, doing these one a week.
like I said, they're coming quick. You know, next thing you know it's like, oh, we're recording again today. Holy hell!
Yeah, just like I would, I generally, when I marathon these movies or if I binge them through or whatever, I generally stick to the order they were released in. The only times I kind of maybe make some exceptions is like, you know, Mothra I like to include, but instead of putting it in front of King Kong versus Godzilla when it was released, sometimes I just put it right before Mothra versus Godzilla to kind of have like a little two-part Mothra thing there. And outside of that, I don't really tinker with the release order of the movies that much. But I would maybe make a case to after Godzilla 2000 to maybe go to GMK and then maybe watch this one right before against Mechagodzilla. So it would be like this one against and Tokyo SOS, just because they're all the same like director and crew, and that against is basically a remake of this movie. Like to kind of watch them back to back and see like the big improvement of like repeating the same concepts. Like I would maybe argue for that on like a fan viewing or whatever if you're gonna binge them all.
Yeah, I'm the same way as you. I usually just watch them all in order. You know, if I'm binging them, but other than that, I'll just pick a random one, throw it in, and enjoy the time.
Yeah, I have some bad OCD where if I decide to watch any of them, I kind of more do like one annual or biannual sort of binge of them all, and I'll just blast through them all from beginning to end over the course of a couple months or something like that. Because I'm one of those like if I start to pick out some randomly, I'm like, oh well, I haven't. There's some of these that I haven't watched in a really long time, and then if I'm watching more than one, I just want to watch them all and in order, and my OCD kicks in.
Well, what's funny is when me and my lady got together, I told her, I was like, like she knew I was a big movie nerd. I love to watch them, talk about them, and as us dating went on and stuff, she found out very quickly that I was a big Godzilla nerd, liked all the movies, liked to collect stuff. And I knew she was a keeper, one to keep around when she over a couple months span watched every single Godzilla film with me, and then went and seen Godzilla King of the Monsters in theaters with me,
Dude,
and Godzilla vs Kong in theaters with me. And
That that's funny because when I mentioned the girlfriend that I used to have that watched them all with me, it was to build up to King of the Monsters. I like did the math. I'm like, if we watch one a week every week, all starting at this point, then we will have watched them all in time for King of the Monsters, and that's what we did. She's like, I'll do it, and so we watched one Godzilla movie a week every week. We made sure we kept that pace, and all the way up until King of the Monsters hit theaters. We're no longer dating, but it was very cool of her to do that.
absolutely, and
Yeah.
leading up to Godzilla vs Kong, like we watched all the Kong movies, the 33, the terrible King Kong Lives, and all of them,
See,
all that.
see, I don't have that kind of dedication to King Kong. I still have not even like I've seen the 33. I've never seen Son of Kong. I've seen King Kong Escapes. I've seen the 76 King Kong. I've seen King Kong Lives maybe once back in the day, and I've seen the '05. So like, but I've never seen the original Son of Kong.
It's very short. It's like an hour and like 8 minutes long, I think. So it's a quick watch.
Hey, that's okay. As I get older and I have less and less time on this world, I appreciate short ass movies.
That's for sure. And as long as you stick around, I plan to get to the Kongs with you as well, just like the Mothras.
We will get to them then. We will get to them.
All right, back to Godzilla versus Megaguirus. Well, what was your favorite scene in this film?
Uh, kind of a two-way tie, and I'll for my tiebreaker, I'll just go with the one that's more unique. I really like it when Godzilla fights the swarm of Meganulon, the flying ones. I really like when he fights the swarm of them, sort of on that island, because you don't get a lot of scenes of Godzilla having that kind of encounter with other creatures of a swarm of tiny ones. And I love that they really kind of squeeze the lemon. Like you see them attaching to Godzilla and injecting into or stabbing into him and pulling the energy out, and he starts to pull him off with his hands and knock him off with his tail, and then he's using his breath to roast a bunch, and like the ones that are attached to his spines catch but like burst into flames from being overheated, and he's swinging his tail to distract him and swipe through him. So he's like clearing the herd out, in however many ways he can, and it's a really good mix of the practical suitmation and the puppet, attachments for the dragonflies, and then the CGI ones that are flying around, and it's a nice mix of techniques where there's digital stuff and practical effects going on at the same time, and so it's a really unique, cool scene. For someone who's never seen the Gamera, you said you've never seen the Gamera movies, right? None of
I
them.
have not.
Ah, well, I would say there's a scene in a great Gamera movie that does a monster versus a swarm in a much cooler way than this, but it was still very cool to see Godzilla get a sequence like this.
Yeah, I like that film. Jesus, I like that scene in this film as well. And I I like them. You know, the swarm. They're trying to suck the power or radiation and stuff out of Godzilla and the nuclear energy. Everything. They're trying to take the power from him to give to the queen. And I found that interesting that they brought that to have a swarm to bring
Yeah,
back to like the queen Megaguirus and stuff. That was a fun little film. Jesus
yeah,
Christ, a fun little scene.
and I want to give a shout out to kind of there's like a series of sequences kind of in the middle of the movie that's kind of switches into like horror mode, like when that couple gets attacked and it attacks the guy, and it like crushes his head, and he's like spitting up blood out of his mouth, and then it like squirts the juices on her face and drags her away. Like, it's like a pretty brutal scene for a movie that I think is officially rated like PG or some nonsense like that, and like it's pretty violent, like it's straight out of like a slasher movie, so it's really cool. And then you see the Meganulon morph into the Meganulon. I always get the two first stages confused, but when it sort of hatches out and molts, and then it switches into dragonfly mode on the side of the building, that's a good moment when the military guys are going through the flooded city, and you see the reveal of all of them on the wall, and that music chimes in. It's like, wow, wow, wow. I remember always being, when I first saw that scene as a kid, I was confused. I didn't know if that was the music or if that was supposed to be the dragonflies making a noise. And so like that scene always just like really stuck with me as like a kind of a haunting scene. And it is the music. It's not the dragonflies making a noise, but it's a good piece of music. Like, it's a good little like just stretch of the movie there. Like, it's not an amazing movie, not a masterpiece or anything, but I kind of dig like a little bit of the sort of creature feature bug monster horror vibes that we get for a few minutes in this movie.
Absolutely. And like I mean, there's a lot of people that don't like insects. They'll think of these things and they'll think of like mosquitoes or something, and it'll just give them the little heebie-jeebies and whatnot.
Yeah. And the final fight's great. The final fight, one thing I will say about Mr. Masaki Tezuka is that he has a thing for the big drawn out final monster battles. He really likes to indulge and make them a big part of his movies, and I do appreciate that as a fan.
And that is my favorite scene, is the final fight scene. It is a little drawn out, but I like that, they get in close with each other. Megaguirus is just taking its claw, or I guess you could call it a claw, its claw hand, and just bashing Godzilla in the face. And it slams Godzilla under the building, and you can see it like give a little smile as it's like hovering over it, and it knocks part of the building down on a Godzilla's face. And I mean, they get in close. They get some combat with each other where they're punching, and Godzilla he grabs Megaguirus' tail with his tail and slams him down. And there's just some moments in the ending fight that are actually some good monster moments, and they look good on film. And those are some of the parts of the films that have aged well, was with the suitmation and whatnot.
Yeah, once you get past the stupidity of the black hole, like a lot of the other stuff about the movie is pretty cool. You know, there's a lot of highlights for this movie. Sujimori gets to ride on Godzilla at one point, and it's like that's a pretty cool thing for a character to get to do. In a Godzilla movie, to get to hitch a ride on Godzilla out in the ocean. And the final battle has a lot of it feels kind of like a throwback to the 70s movies in a way where they would always end with like what felt like a very prolonged and sometimes dragged out final monster battle where it's just a lot of like humans either not on screen or barely like on screen watching it, and it's just a lot of like big monster fights to keep the kids in the audience satisfied. And so this feels like that kind of a thing, and there's a lot of fun visual storytelling in the fights. You see Godzilla like shaking his head when he's disoriented, and he's like looking around, and there's a lot of like back and forth between him and the queen Megaguirus. I like that he uses his tail in kind of like a dexterous way, like he wraps it around her stinger and flings her, and you know he uses his spines to chop one of her claws off. They sort of do like the samurai movie anime moment thing where they run past each other and you don't know which one's been hit or who's been hurt, and then her claw falls off because he cut it when they passed. Like stuff like that is just it's really fun and it's really cool. I like it.
Yeah, same with that made me think of the freeze frame when she's bringing her
Yes.
stinger at his mouth and it just freeze frames and you think, "Oh, she stuck him right in the throat or the
Yeah,
face," or
yeah.
and he just bites it off and it's
And
like,
then
"Oh,
you get the
she's done."
reveal. Yeah, yeah, exactly. You think she's got the death blow landed, and then he breaks it apart. And I remember like having such a reaction to that moment as a kid. I was just like entranced by the final fight of this movie as a kid. Uh, Not a big fan of like the high flying body slam that he does on Megaguirus. Not the fact that like he does it, but the shot where it looks like he's jumped like 1,000 feet into the air and is falling down towards the camera. Like that's a corny shot that I would not have had in the final cut. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of that. Like you said, it looks like you 1,000 feet in the air, and when really in reality, that might have been an 100-foot vertical for him, if that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, if you edited the movie the right way, you could kind of take that shot out and like show him jumping and then show him sort of crashing onto her, and it would, I think that scene and moment would work a little more and not take you out of the movie as much. Like the whole like the shot of him just like full blown airborne. It's just like over the top. So that I never loved that moment as a kid. Uh, I do like one thing I did like with these flying monsters is they often, their wing it's this is something that non-fans I think care about more so than the diehard fans, but the wing flaps never seem like they're flapping quite enough to sustain the weight of them and to keep them airborne. But I did like a subtle digital thing that they did with Megaguirus where they gave her like these hyper flapping wings to really kind of accentuate like she's flapping her wings enough to stay airborne. Like it would have been interesting to see a version of Mothra with like the busier wings, to kind of like bring them into that more modern era. But it was cool to see with Megaguirus, and I'd love to see Mothra and maybe Batra and Megaguirus, have like a three-way fight one day. That'd be interesting to see.
Oh yeah, I'd love to see some of the insect creatures from the Godzilla franchise go at it. Let's bring Kumonga in for an all-out brawl with Mothra and Kamacuras and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, just as I kind of always want like the sort of like weird Godzilla clones and cousins, like Gorosaurus and G98 and Biollante and Orga and like all the sort of like Godzilla derivative monsters. Just like I'd love to see all of them in a movie together.
With one in one hand and you know what in the other one. See which one fills up faster.
Exactly, exactly, exactly.
How about I move on to some fun facts for you since we got our favorite scenes out of the way.
Let's do it.
Nope, sorry. Numbers. We did fun facts.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, you're right. That's how fun they were. We forgot
Yeah.
about.
Forgot about how fun Megaguirus was.
Yep, yep.
All right, on Rotten Tomatoes, Godzilla vs. Megaguirus has an approval rating of 60% based on only 5 reviews with a rating average of 6.5 out of 10.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, a middle of the pack entry.
Yeah, not to hate on it, but that sounds about right.
The budget for this film was 950 million yen,
or about 8.5 million, I believe it was, not adjusted for inflation. And the film, the made in the box office, 1.2 billion yen, or roughly around 10 million, again, not adjusted for inflation in American dollars. So this definitely, like I said earlier, it did not do very well and was the lowest grossing, again, since the 75 Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Yeah, so the obvious decision would be to bring the entire team behind this movie back for more movies.
Yeah.
Obviously.
See if they can do better in a round two. And I mean,
And in their defense they did, but I'm just saying for the time,
yeah.
I don't track the logic of that decision.
Yeah, you didn't see him bringing back the director of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch to do Halloween 4. So,
Yeah. Yeah, very very good example for the horror aficionados out there.
this film has a 6 out of 10 on IMDb. 90% of Google users liked this film, which
Well,
those damn Google users, like you say, those Chads, that might be a little high for my liking.
they're lower standards, they're like I see monster fights, I click thumbs up.
Godzilla, this is a good number for you. I know you like this one. Godzilla is on screen for 20 minutes and 8 seconds of the film, or roughly 19% of the movie. With his first appearance, he shows up just over 3 minutes into the film, or right around 3% into the film. So we get him for about a fifth of the movie, or 20%. And he shows up right away in the beginning, roaring and destroying stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like 90% of his screen time is all in that final battle. Like it just feels like the third act of this is just like super Godzilla heavy.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it has probably that final battle. That's probably 12 to 15 minutes of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Total admissions in Japan for this film were approximately 1,350,000 tickets. The worst for the series since Terror of Mechagodzilla, again in 1975.
Yeah, that says something.
Yeah, I still don't understand why Terror of Mechagodzilla did so bad when the 74
yeah. Well,
did so well.
there was a lot of industry stuff going into that. There was just a lot of other factors. It wasn't purely Godzilla. It was like the genre and the industry versus TV and all that other stuff.
Yeah, a lot of factors that I'm sure, we don't know about or understand.
Yeah.
That is all I have for you on the fun facts. Not very many for this film.
Yeah.
I could not find too much. I'm sure once we get into later films on like the American films or Final Wars or something, I'm sure we'll be able to find some stuff that's a little more interesting.
Indeed. We're gonna talk a little bit about monster design for this one.
Absolutely. Go ahead and take it away.
Well, Godzilla's design, I know there will be people who could point out the slight or subtle differences between Godzilla 2000 and this one, but essentially it's the same design and the same breadth and same aesthetic as Godzilla 2000. This one maybe has a bit of a lighter skin color, or maybe it's just kind of the color grading of the movie making it look a little lighter, or the lighting of the movie perhaps. Uh, Feels a little more agile and a little more mobile than Godzilla 2000. Feels like it's moving around with a little bit less weight, which isn't the worst thing in the world. Certainly seems to be doing a lot more with his tail in this movie, using it a lot more, which is cool and fun. But it's a good look. It's a good design. I'm glad that they at least continued the design, even if they didn't continue the continuity. Uh, yeah. So I mean, what do you think about them reusing Godzilla here?
I believe his spines have a little bit more of a purple tint as well.
Yeah, a little bit stronger on the ends. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like this design a lot. I've always liked the look of the really sharp spines, the really sharp jagged teeth, the toenails that are again very sharp and pointed, same with the fingernails. I like Godzilla looking like he's a force to be reckoned with, but still an animal or a creature, you know. So
Yeah,
I
have
like this design a lot.
yeah, it's an overall very sort of jagged and dangerous look, and I do like that this Godzilla puts his sort of melee tools to good use. He's using his tail a lot. He uses his spines to cut off her claw. Like I like that aspect of it, that it's like every part of him is a weapon. Uh, I think Megaguirus has a cool design. Big old dragonfly looks evil and crazy and creepy. I think it's a good look.
Yeah, this is like how Godzilla is kind of jagged and stuff. Like Megaguirus is the same way. Got the super sharp teeth, got the stinger, and it's got like almost like little prickers all over its body, like little spines everywhere along its tail and whatnot. And I mean, it's even its skin. It looks really. It's like shiny, almost like a sharp, jagged, like sleek design. Wasn't really a big fan of how its wings went into like that like hurricane mode almost type, and I wish I could remember what the move was called from Godzilla, like Save the Earth or whatever game it was that Mega Gears was on.
Oh.
But
Yeah, the weird sort of like rippling effect that like they created, and like sometimes when she jutted very fastly, it looked like a kind of a cheap sort of just digital movement of just like shifting the character across the screen really fast. I like seeing the wings flap faster. That was kind of cool. But the sort of CGI digital effects around that kind of leave a little bit to be desired. But I mean, for a Japanese movie from the year 2000, I suppose it's not terrible CGI.
no, I mean it definitely could have been worse, but it's just not a crazy favorite effect of mine. But I did
No.
like the design. Same with the Mega Nulon. I liked them. The Mega Nula. Both I like those designs. I like the scene that you brought up when it kind of sheds its skin and leaves the like the husk behind on the building. I liked that. That was kind of cool. And then I
Yeah,
did like seeing them all on the side of the building shedding all their husks and taking off into flight. So I did like the monster design in this film, but I would have liked a better film to go around it.
yeah. I'm a Starship Troopers fan, so like bug creatures and things like that, and insectoid bug creatures are really, I like seeing them in movies. I generally don't like insects and stuff like that in real life, but I like seeing movies with them as creatures. And so seeing a character, I like characters that sort of transform and morph, and Megagearus kind of has that going on. You have like the queen that all the other ones power. I kind of like a hive mind creature where it's like many bodies but one mind. I am into stuff like that, and there's flavors of a lot of that. But the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm like, oh man, there was a Gamera movie about 4 years before this one that kind of did a lot of this stuff way better. But one day we will get to those Gamera movies, so we'll have fun with that.
And I'll be new to watching them, so I'll have to pay
Yeah.
attention 1,000%.
Oh yeah, the Showa movies are gonna be. You'll have fun with those because they are very much like so corny they're good, so bad they're good, sort of really kind of childish and chintzy and over the top. The kind of over the top Godzilla movies of the 70s. You get a lot of that fun in the Gamera movies of the Showa era, but Gamera Heisei trilogy is just like a chef's kiss. It is excellent. So it runs the gamut.
Well, I am ready for it. I'm always ready for some new monster films. And I'm a creature feature kind of guy. So anything,
Mhm.
with monsters, crocs, sharks, gators, stuff like that, I'm all for it.
Indeed, indeed.
Well, I that is all. Ooh, we got to go into our tier rating. We have 3 films in our
Ah,
tier rating so
yes,
far.
yes, 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 yeah. We almost missed it. We almost missed it. I would. So we'll go. We'll go worst to best. I don't know if this is going to come off as controversial or not, but I would put Godzilla 98 as the worst. I'd put Godzilla versus Megaguirus at the number 2 spot so far, and Godzilla 2000 number 1. Here's the interesting thing: like Godzilla 98 overall stronger movie than Godzilla Megaguirus, but the tiebreaker is like the portrayal of Godzilla himself in Godzilla versus Megaguirus is way, way, way better than the portrayal of Godzilla himself in Godzilla 98. So it's like when that's kind of the main event and the main sort of focal piece of the movie, like the portrayal of the main character and the main monster is very important. So it's like overall movie and everything around it and production value and what have you of G98 is superior to Megaguirus, but like truth to the character and the spirit of the character, design of the character, behavior of the character is all much stronger in Godzilla versus Megaguirus. So it gets the number 2 spot.
And I had a tough time thinking about that if I wanted to put 98 in my 2 spot or in my bottom spot. And because I thoroughly enjoyed Godzilla 98 on this most recent rewatch, but I would have to agree with you that 98 still goes on the bottom just for the portrayal of Godzilla. You know, they killed him in that 98 film with missiles, and that's blasphemy in the Toho world. So
Yeah. They had him
98,
laying eggs. They had him laying hundreds of eggs, it's just odd things.
Yeah, just stuff that was changed up that you won't see probably in another Godzilla film. You won't see him laying eggs. You won't see him getting killed by missiles. You know, and that 98's in my 3 spot at the bottom, Megaguirus in the 2, and we're gonna probably agree with this one for a while. Godzilla 2000 at the top spot.
Yeah, in parentheses, US version.
Oh, 100%. 100%. But
I don't know where I would put the Godzilla 2000 Japanese version. No offense to it, but that US version is better.
If we're doing the Japanese version too, that would be in my 4th spot. That would be under 98.
Oh, very good, very good.
But we do have a good one coming up, and a film that I really like because Godzilla vs. Megaguirus was followed by, are you ready for this title? Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, or the short version is just GMK, which was released on December 15th, 2001. And that is what we will be looking at next week. So that should be a fun conversation as well.
Ooh, that's going to be an excellent conversation. That's one of the highlights of the Millennium series, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
Absolutely. I know a lot of Godzilla fans are high on that film, just not in the Millennium series, but out of the whole franchise.
Yeah, it's certainly, it's a great example of a unique take that really works, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure. For sure. But we will be looking at that one next time. But until then, Chris, I will say thank you again for joining me on our 25th Godzilla episode in Godzilla vs. Megaguirus.
Yeah, happy to be here, and we just keep on trucking along, don't we?
Oh yeah, every time we get another episode, I'm happy, I'm excited, and I'm ready to go for it. And it's going to be a sad day when we run out of Godzilla films to do and have to move on to the next franchise.
Yeah, it will be, but we'll start to kick in a little. We'll be able to get some more variety going on. Start to kick into some other genres, some other series, some other characters. Things like that.
Absolutely, I'm ready to continue for as long as we can. But thank you again. Thank you to anyone who's listening. Again, GMK, or Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, is next week. So until next time.